hot space, and I'm jealous. We don't. It feels cool. It feels like you'd come up with lots of ideas if you worked here. My office doesn't feel quite like this, but we did hatch collaboratively the Open Government Partnership. I just say a few things. I mean, mainly just to applaud this and to say how exciting it is, and that the White House is a couple blocks in one direction, the State Department's a couple blocks in another, and there are a zillion departments and agencies around who would really benefit from the infusion of energy and insight that you all bring to bear every day to your work. The President did, start off at the very beginning of his first term. President Obama started at the beginning of his first term issuing this Open Government Memorandum, and it really did set the tone for the administration, and it does signal just what a priority this was to him. We are now on the verge of starting a second term, and everybody in the administration is working to think through how does this manifest itself in the second term, the last term. You don't get a chance after this next 4 years to do it again, and we're all very aware of that, and we know we're going to benefit from the ideas that you have. Just to give you an indicator of what OGP has come to mean to the president, I mean, this was, I suppose, catalyzed in a speech that he gave before the UN General Assembly. He gets to do those speeches once a year. It's a kind of State of the Union for foreign policy. And he chose to use that speech in year 2 of his presidency to talk about the fact that the kind of old divisions, or the old way of thinking about open and closed, North and South, East and West, had really, I should say North and South and East and West had been overtaken by open and closed and scales of openness, degrees of openness. And he challenged the countries there, and in a sense through the leaders, to the extent that that works, the peoples to come back with ideas for how we could each promote transparency, fight corruption, harness new technologies and innovation to empower citizens. And that gave rise to this brainstorm, which in turn gave rise to something that now has a logo. It's always very thrilling to see a logo grow out of a brainstorm, and with this terrific new leadership. Where's Linda? We're very, very excited about this next phase of OGP's growth. But this, I think, in many ways is President Obama's signature governance initiative, and it's something he takes extremely seriously. In bilateral meetings with foreign heads of state, he often brings this up spontaneously if we have failed somehow to get it into the talking points. It is something that he's talked to Prime Minister Cameron about. The UK and the Indonesians, of course, are the co-chairs now. The United States no longer is. But to try to energize again this next phase. And the trip to Burma, which just occurred, which was a very moving trip, I got to be a part of that. It was amazing to see President Barack Hussein Obama at the home of Aung San Suu Kyi, maybe the next leader of that country, but talking about open government with Insane and talking about the Open Government Partnership and the Burmese coming out on that trip and committing to try to be part of the Open Government Partnership by 2015. And articulating each of the milestones on budget transparency, on the asset disclosure for public officials, civil liberties, freedom of information. So OGP and this open government conversation as a hook to make progress on issues that at this stage in Burma's long journey, it's critical that they make progress on. And so I just wanted to convey how much this really matters to him personally. And then second, and we talked about this a little bit today, earlier when I got to meet with Linda, the challenge of conversion still exists, I find, with other governments, with officials in my own government, and certainly with citizens and even civil society groups around the world who don't self-identify in this space. And so I think thinking through the ways in which platforms like this one, we can pull together the best success stories, the ways in which citizens have concretely benefited, and I think, Ian, I missed your presentation, but this is what it's all about. It's not about the abstraction of fighting corruption or promoting transparency or harnessing innovation. It's about, are the kids getting the textbooks that they're supposed to get? Does transparency provide a window into whether resources are going where they're meant to go? And to the degree that that window exists, are citizens aware and benefiting from that data and that information such that they can hold their governments accountable? And then does the government care that citizens care that those discrepancies exist, right? Like, that's ultimately what this is about. And I think the more that we have concrete examples of real children, of real hospitals, of real polluted water and cleaner water, of real cost savings in constrained budget times, the more success we're going to have in bringing new people into this community. And I confess, I was not one. I mean, Jeremy Weinstein used to come and knock on my door and say, what is it, open government, open? I didn't understand it. And then a few examples, and I was like, oh, this is exactly what I've been trying to do under another rubric, for a very long time. And this creates the possibility for a different kind of conversation that sometimes democracy and human rights and issues like that can get other governments and on their heels. Open government creates the opportunity for a conversation that sometimes doesn't exist. The last thing I'd say is just to underscore, I think, again, a point that's been made, but in some sense, they say art imitates life, like this space imitates life. This space itself seems to be kind of predicated on the logic of open government, open society, open idea sharing, information sharing. It's great. Our little OGP experiment, I think, is one that a lot of these groups are using. We benefited from what most of the groups and most of you have been doing for, again, a very long time, which is to recognize that we don't know what we're doing. We need to hear and learn from people who are out in the field. We have ideas, and they can be very abstract. And what the civil society partners have brought to the Open Government Partnership is just one example of what you are bringing to people's lives every day. You have the interface with people, the ability to track whether policies are working. And so just as the partnership itself, yes, has this, I think, originality to it in being multi-stakeholder and having civil society and governments at the table as equals, figuring out what we're doing, so too our criteria for whether a country is or isn't eligible is the product of NGO data or academic frameworks. There just has to be this cross-pollination. And again, OGP is just one version of this, but I think the more that our communities are talking to one another, and certainly I speak from the government perspective now, just sucking in the work and the insights that you all bring to bear, the better off real people are going to be, and the more likely those kids are going to get the textbooks. So thanks very much, and thanks for having me.